We are on section 1.6 of your book, Angles and Their Measure. Here is an angle. An angle is made up of two sides. And notice that one side is a ray. The other side is another ray. So I would call this ray, ray AB. That would be one side of the angle, and ray AC would be the other side of the angle. Now when two rays meet at an endpoint, they can form an angle. Okay? So the angle is made up of two sides, which are rays, and it has a vertex. And the vertex is where the endpoints of the rays meet. Okay? And we can use the name of the vertex to name the angle. So I can say that this angle here is angle A, and this is the symbol we use for angle. I like to use this symbol, angle A. Okay? So I like this with a little curve on it. We can also name the angle by using 3 points. And the 3 points, out of the 3 points, the middle point must be your vertex. So for example, I can name this angle angle CAB, and notice how A, which is your vertex, is the middle letter of your angle name. Or you can also name this angle BAC. But the important thing is that your middle letter is always the letter of your vertex. So there you have 3 ways of naming the angle. Another way of naming the angle is you can have a number inside of the angle, and then you can label the angle angle 5. Okay? So 4 ways of naming an angle. Let's see this exercise. How many angles do you see here? How many can you name? So look at it for a moment. Write some notes in your notebook and tell me all the different angles you see, and then check back. The first angle you see is PQS or SQP. Notice that the vertex letter is always the middle letter of the 3 letters that you choose to name your angle, and you can name it PQS or SQP. It doesn't matter. For your second angle, there it is, angle SQR or angle RQS, and the middle letter is always your vertex. And for your third angle that we see, this yellow one, the big one, PQR or RQP. Okay, name this angle. What do you think we can name this? Remember to use S. The vertex letter is your middle letter. So go ahead and write in your notebook, make this drawing, take notes, and tell me the name of this angle, and come back for the answer. There's the answer. I can either name it angle S, I could name it angle RST, or angle TSR. How about this one? How many angles can I name here? A lot. So jot this down in your notebook and try labeling these angles and come back for the answer. Here they are. You could have angle HMK or KMH. You could have angle HMN or angle NMH. You also have angle KMN or NMK. Notice I cannot name this angle angle M. Why not? Because angle M doesn't tell me which of all of these 3 angles I'm talking about. In this case, angle S is equivalent to saying RST or TSR because it's the same angle, but not in this case. So we cannot call this angle angle M. Be careful with that. And for this one, go ahead, draw this in your notebook and label all of the angles and come back for the answer. Here is the answer. Again, I cannot name this angle angle J. I cannot do that because angle J doesn't tell me specifically what angle I'm referring to, if I'm referring to angle GJC or CJF. So be careful with that. We can only name it when it's only one angle, not more than one angle. Okay, angle measurements. How do we measure the angle? Whenever we're talking about the measure of the angle, we talk about this symbol, M, which stands for measure, angle A. And that means the measure of angle A. So that's the symbol we're going to use anytime we talk about the measure of the angle, which is a number. Whenever we're talking about the object, the angle, we do not use the letter M in front. We just use angle and the name of the angle like we did in the previous examples. Okay? And we measure angles with a protractor. And we're going to see what that is. And the units we use to measure angles is degrees. Angles with the same measure are congruent angles, just like what we saw with the segments. Segments with equal measures are congruent segments. So if the measure of angle A is equal to the measure of angle B, and notice here, measure of angle A, this is a number. And the measure of angle B is another number in degrees. If those numbers are equal, we use equal when we talk about numbers, then we can say that the objects are congruent. So this means the object, angle A, and the object, angle B, without knowing the numbers. They are congruent if their measures are equal. The same thing we did for segments. And here's a protractor, and it's a 180-degree protractor. And notice that there's an inside that increases from right to left, and we have an outside measurement which increases from left to right. And I'm going to show you how we're going to use this to measure angles. This line here, this line is the line I'm always going to align my protractor with. That's the baseline, okay? This dot here, we're always going to align the vertex at this dot, where the crosshairs of your protractor are. That's where we're going to align the vertex. And I already talked about the two sets of numbers, the inside numbers and the outside numbers. Okay? And when we measure angles, it's important to know which numbers we're going to use, the inside ones or the outside ones. Okay? So here's an example. There's your baseline and there's your angle. Now you take your protractor and you're going to line it up at the crosshairs. You take the crosshairs and you put them where the vertex is as accurately as possible. There you go. There it is. So your baseline is aligned with the baseline of your protractor. The crosshairs are at the vertex, and then you can measure this angle. Now, which numbers do I use? The inside numbers or the outside numbers to read off this angle? Well, we use the inside numbers. Why? Because the baseline here, wherever the baseline touches your 0, that's the number you're going to use, the inside numbers. Notice that this baseline touches these outside numbers at 180. Those are not the numbers we want to use. We want to use the ones where the baseline touches the 0 degrees. Another way of knowing is, imagine that this angle were closed, that the baseline and this side of the angle were both on top of each other. And imagine an angle as rotating that side open. So you're opening from bottom towards going this way. You can imagine that you're also increasing numbers going that way. So you would use from 0 to 40. Okay? And that's how you would measure this angle. And this angle measures 40 degrees. Okay? Since the line is resting on 40. So that is 40 degrees. Let's try another one. Here's an angle. Here's my protractor. We align the crosshairs with the baseline. We put the crosshairs right at the vertex. And notice that my baseline touches 0 at the inside numbers, that means I'm going to use the inside numbers. So how much does this angle measure? There it is. It measures 70 degrees. Okay? Here's another example. How much does this one measure? Notice that the baseline again passes the 0. It touches it, so I'm going to use the inside numbers to measure. What is the measure of this angle? You can see that it's 120. Now, I have an angle that's facing to the left now. Watch what happens when I try to measure this. Remember that I align the vertex with the crosshairs. There it is. And now look at the baseline for this angle. It touches 0 where the outside numbers are. So those are the numbers I'm going to use for this angle. So how much does this angle measure? It measures 60 degrees. Okay? We use the outside numbers, and there it is. The angle is 60 degrees. Okay? Good. This exercise here, no, it's not going to work. Okay. Types of angles. Now that you know how to measure them, there are 3 types of angles, or 4 types of angles. You have acute angles. Acute angles are angles that measure between 0 and 90 degrees. And we also say that they measure less than 90, okay, more than 0. Let's go back a little bit. Another way to say acute angle is they measure between 0 and 90. I can say that if this is angle A, I can say that the measure of angle A is less than 90 degrees but greater than 0 degrees. So that's another way of saying an acute angle. The next kind of angle we have is the right angle. Right angles are angles that measure exactly 90 degrees. And here's what a right angle looks like. And usually we can write that the measure of angle, if this is angle A, I'm going to use A for all my angles. The measure of angle A equals 90. So that's a right angle, and you will see this symbol used a lot when we talk about right angles. You'll see a small square indicating this is a right angle. The other kind of angle is, oh, there it is, that little square I was talking to you about. Obtuse angle. An obtuse angle is an angle that measures more than 90 degrees but less than 180 degrees. There it is. So if I label this angle A, I can write that the measure of angle A is less than 180 degrees but greater than 90 degrees. Okay? That's an obtuse angle. And the last angle we're going to see is the straight angle, which measures exactly 180 degrees. So if this is angle A, the measure of angle A is equal to 180 degrees. That's when the angle opens up completely into a straight line. It has turned 180 degrees. Those are your 4 types of angles. So classify each one of these angles. If the measure of angle A is 130, can you tell me if this is an acute angle, an obtuse angle, a right angle, or a straight angle? What do you think? It is obtuse because it is greater than 90 degrees. How about letter B? If the angle is equal to 90 degrees, that one is easy. You should know that that is what? A right angle. Very good. Now letter C, the measure of angle C is 45. What does that mean? Is it acute, obtuse, right, or straight? Well, it's less than 90, so it is called an acute angle. Okay? Now, I want you to, in your notebook, use your protractor. I want you to draw 3 angles. And then I want you to make sure that all of these 3 angles are less than 180 degrees. So that means I don't want a straight line. And then I want you to measure your 3 angles with your protractor so that you can practice measuring angles with your protractor. So in your notebook, I want to see 3 different angles, all of them less than 180, and then use your protractor and measure it. How do you draw angles? Well, I don't have a ruler with me right here, but you start off by drawing the base of the angle, or your initial side, and then you draw the other part. So draw any 3 angles that you want and then measure them, okay, with your protractor, and tell me what they measure in degrees. That's just for you to practice. So go ahead and hit pause and do it in your notebook and then come back. Now we're going to talk about congruent angles. The same thing with the segments. We can say that 2 figures are congruent if I take one of the figures and I place it on top of the other one and they match exactly, like what's happening here. Angle A is congruent to angle B. Okay, and this is how we write that notation. Angle A congruent to angle B. These notations here talk about the figure or the object. Whenever we talk about the objects, we use the congruent symbol. Now, if 2 figures are congruent, then that implies that the measures of the angles are equal. So the measure of angle A and the measure of angle B are equal. When we talk about the measures, we're talking about the numbers, how much they measure, how much do each of them measures. So if angle A is 30 degrees and angle A is congruent to angle B, then I can say that angle B also measures 30 degrees. Okay? That's what it means. In the next video, where we will talk about the angle addition postulate, which is basically the same thing as the segment addition postulate, but with angles. I'll see you then.